my name is Lloyd and I want to talk about cruelty, or how useful is an understanding of cruelty. What uses does it have? Does it mislead people in any way, and does it cause in it of itself suffering and pain and a limited relationship with reality? Does it distort people's perspective of reality? Does it distort their capacity to interact with reality more effectively? I had a run-in with someone who probably has impaired prefrontal cortex activity. They have no empathy. I experience that when I speak to them. Other people that I've met took 8 years to experience the distinct lack of empathy in their dealings with several people, which is the quote that they use, the distinct lack of empathy in their dealings with several people, which was witnessed by them in discussions. I have agreed with somebody that they're probably a psychopath, but I'm not a clinician or anything. I can't, it's my word, so that's my perspective on the idea. So I had a run-in with someone who has no empathy. My experience of that, and what I learned from that, and how I purport myself from that, is to be aware of the existence of human beings with no empathy. They can be anywhere, they can infiltrate any institution. They're probably even like charities. I would say they probably even are attracted to going to charities because charities are the perfect institutions to manipulate other people from, because they're doing it for the good of whoever X, Y and Z, and they want to be the top of the charity, and they're the one doing all the good work, and they fluff their ego in that way. Anyway, so I had this I didn't really have a relationship. I had this interaction with this person. Coming out of it, I learned to be aware of fundamental cruelty. I would have said at the time that I'm aware that 1% of the population is probably a psychopath. Now, what happened was that this psychopath attempted to use an habituation technique in order to get me to be habituated into thinking that they were superior to me. This involved a game where their part in the game was to decide whether or not I was doing a good or a bad thing, which isn't actually a game. If you think about it, a game is where two people play by the same rules, but they decided that they had all of the power in the game, and that was how they decided it was going to be played. I know that cults play similar games to habituate people into becoming members of the cult and to accept the authority of the cult. You start by playing games, and then it becomes inherent within you, and you seek the gratification of pleasing the authority figure, because that's what you've been doing in the game. So what you practice then becomes what you are. It becomes embodied in you by dint of practicing it. Anyway, so this psychopath tried to do this to me, or someone I think is a psychopath tried to do this to me. I didn't respond well. It offended me deeply that they were even trying to do it straight in front of me, and I knew what they were doing. Anyway, I took from this that there is just cruelty in the world. It is just part of, how can I put it? It's just part of existing. The psychopath doesn't know they're doing anything cruel because they don't have the understanding that you are a human being. They might not even have the understanding that they are. They just know their motivations, like a predator. You can't teach. If you were to teach a tiger the perspectives of deer, they would only become better hunters. And likewise, psychopaths, when you teach them about other humans who do have empathy and prefrontal cortexes that work, they only become better psychopaths. There's just an inherent cruelty there. Now, I treat that now as since there's a body of water beside me, I know how to purport myself beside a body of water without drowning. I know the risks of drowning. There isn't a body of water in the world that I could not drown in. I know that that's a perspective. So there isn't a potential psychopath out there that could not, or is impossible for me to become the emotional victim of, or the psychological victim, or even the physical victim of. There's no cult out there that I couldn't be brainwashed by the same methods that the psychopaths use. Cruelty is just inherent in the world, and I have to treat the world with its existence being there. Now, to better do that, I would best integrate my shadow, in the terms of Carl Jung, understand the cruelty that I am capable of, so that I would then understand the cruelty that others are capable of, and then I would be able to respond and treat the world more fully of what it's capable of. Like, be aware that water can drown you. I need to be aware of the harshness of what could happen to me from external actors or bad actors. So, is it useful for me to call it cruelty? Because it's just something that happens. It's just an inherent thing of the world. Water can drown you, fire will burn you. Behave around these things as though they are what they are to keep yourself reasonably safe. Cruel people will hurt you, or attempt to. Do as you should around them to keep yourself safe. Is it fine to differentiate them from other phenomena of pain and inducement of pain? And I'm running out of path here, so I'm going to go back and start again, because if I turn around, the sun's a problem. Maybe. Yeah, okay, maybe. So, alright. So this person can hurt you. How do they hurt you? And where was I? Sorry for this break in the middle. It's going to happen. Maybe I should cut it out. Right, so treat the world irrespective of its intention. Now, where is cruelty outside of intention? Does cruelty exist if we are not recognizing the intent of cruelty? Because we don't think that water is cruel because it's just water. Whereas, is the cruel person who doesn't understand that other humans are humans, by dint of their impaired prefrontal cortex, or that tigers will hunt deer or whatever they hunt, antelope, they aren't seeing things from the other thing's perspective. So, is it useful to call it cruel? And what are the responses to calling things cruel? If you were to call something cruel, does it induce the person who calls it cruel, into a greater sense of fear? Do they lose an ability to interact with the situation? That's what I think anyway, because when you've judged it as being cruel, you have put it in a category of things that you would not do, or could not do, and you are doing something cruel, and you would inherently think of yourself as being someone who does good things. You are a good actor, you behave in a good way. So cruelty is something you accuse of another. So is it therefore something that you make yourself less capable of relating with, less capable of understanding, and therefore less capable of interacting with the idea and the activity that's happening. So to better understand, relate and interact with the activity of the cruel person, it's not helpful to call it cruelty. It would be better to just acknowledge the activity as it is, and not to have the definition of cruelty placed between you and the activity. And also I want to get back to the integration of the shadow. So, when you call an idea cruel, you are disassociating yourself with it, or could be, or maybe you want to associate yourself with cruelty. Anyway, in the majority of cases, someone is associating another with being cruel, and they are disassociating themselves with the activity of cruelty. And this is the criticism of veganism. It's necessary to integrate your shadow, to integrate yourself with the understanding of cruelty or cruel things, to not disparage or to be incapable of interacting with cruelty or understandings of cruelty, to better relate, to better respond to cruelty when it occurs, or what is now known as cruelty when it occurs. So, veganism is an idea of trying to ethically or report or conceive yourself as being ethical, and distancing yourself from what is being called an act of cruelty and what is being discredited or made other, putting yourself as superior. And therefore you are, or by being vegan or by perceiving cruelty in this way, the person is destroying their relationship with their own shadow. And in destroying their relationship with their own shadow, they are less capable of understanding and relating to the cruel things that they're capable of and would do. And this is why I've witnessed vegans declare war on each other, for example. Animal rights activists seem not to consider humans as animals and think it's fine to even kill humans in certain circumstances for the lives of animals. So there's a sort of disintegration of the shadow in the creation of the ethic, or the ethic, or there is a disintegrated shadow from which the ethic is produced. And the people become less capable of interacting with the reality. And a quote that I told my friend, of the friend that requested that I make this video, was that it is hubris to think that you can mitigate the cruelty in existence. Cruelty just is. It is cruelty to animals that you are eating and taking their food from them that they could be eating, and some animals are dying because you are eating food. That's the sort of logical extension of veganism. You know, that tree is being cruel to that tree, is being cruel to that tree because it's taking its nourishment from the soil. For example, it's an absurdity in a way. It's necessary to arbitrarily decide what cruelty is and what cruelty isn't, to have a notion of cruelty in and of itself, and that's hubristic. That's quite narcissistic, to have a decision on what cruelty is and then to evaluate the world in accordance with that evaluation. It can't be accurate, and it can only be arbitrary in its definition and boundaries. So yeah, it's necessary to perceive the world without analysing it from the perspective of perpetrators and victims, without the notion of cruelty, because all things are to some extent cruel. All things limit all things limit the activities of some other thing. You know, water limits the activities of the land, stuff like that. You know, there isn't a body of water that you can't drown in. Does that make water cruel? There was a lovely bit of Rick and Morty where Rick created a world where his daughter could not die, where he could not drown himself, and he could not fall from a great height onto land that was so hard that it would kill you. Is the land cruel because it would kill you if you fell from a great height onto it? Is water cruel because you would drown in it if you were foolish enough to make yourself a victim of it, or make yourself a potential victim of drowning? It's yeah, it's not a useful concept. It distances the person using the concept from the outcomes of the concept, from the outcomes of the act, from interacting with the capacity of the act, from their own fear of the act, of what's happening. And it distorts the emotional stability of people. The idea of cruelty distorts the emotional stability of people. And it's possible to perceive activities without needing to evaluate them as cruel. They can just be what they are. It might take a lot of meditation to get to a state where someone can be sufficiently still within a world where they haven't got the definitions. People become safe by building definitions in the world. They think they know what they are and stuff, but some definitions are toxic to you and toxic to the people that you're talking to, and toxic in their use. And I think cruelty is one of them, especially in the way that it gets used, especially in the way that it has led to a general adoption of veganism, I suppose. I mean, I was vegetarian for many years, but you know. Anyway, I think I'll need to explain it better in future, but who knows, I might be able to get it down to a couple of minutes like the other ideas. Anyway, thanks for, if you did listen this far, that is unbelievable and amazing. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, and discuss in comments or argue with me. Thank you. My name is Lloyd. Goodbye.